First off, thank you guys so much for giving me the stage to talk about this movie and for a theater to watch the movie today. It would not exist without Maxon in a multitude of ways, of which I'll go through here today. While the movie is about a child's drawings coming to life, it was really important to me that this movie feel grounded in reality and that the emotional stakes not just be preserved, but like served and enhanced by the execution of these creatures. So I'm really proud to say that aside from the 536 visual effects shots, the film contains no CGI. I am so glad that joke worked in here. Just in case the joke didn't work in this room, I made this slide just to be safe. Of course this movie contains CGI. I mean, for one, it's me, and for two, but I'm gonna say visual effects from now on instead of CGI, because that's what people really are saying. But two, VFX rule. Like, we all know this, the world should know this. Visual effects, they solve problems, they save lives, and they are cool. The 3 S's of visual effects. A phrase that you hear a lot these days, and really all the time, is that people love, it's fix it in post. And we love to reference this phrase pejoratively usually, because it's usually in the context of a shot or idea that's been poorly planned or not planned at all. And usually in these circumstances, it's the person saying it, usually the director, who has no idea what they mean when they say it. I like to think that's not the case on our film. For one, we were not without preparation. Even with our rushed pre-production schedule of only 4 weeks, our director of photography, Meg Stacy, you can see up there, where is she? There she is, there's Meg. We found a way to plan out every single shot ahead of time, even if it meant giving up our weekends during the shoot to hole up in my office and shot list all day to stay ahead of the schedule. One way we were able to do this in such a short time, and really efficiently, we took LiDAR scans of all of our locations when we scouted them, which allowed us to reference the exact geography and layout of our sets while we planned, so Meg was able to create these intricate lighting overhead diagrams that saved us so much time on the day because we weren't showing up and figuring out, well, what are we gonna do today? The future is now and amazing. On top of all of our creative planning, our assistant director team, led by, it's Kyler Wilson, he's our first assistant director. He and his team meticulously planned our schedules, and juggling, it's the hardest job. It's his job to juggle Meg and I's creative ambitions with the reality of the world, like of life and the world. I mean, we're talking about a very limited budget, a cast of kids, and kids, a little thing you might not know, they're minors. They have very strict restrictions and rules on how many hours they're allowed to work in a day. Not only that, how many hours of school they're required to have, that you're required to provide for them as a production. And those are non-negotiable rules. And so this was a very tough movie to logistically make happen, so that required a lot of planning. Your conditions are constantly changing on a movie set, and it's always easier to pivot to a new plan when you had an original plan to pivot from, because then your goals and needs are clear. So, again, fixing it in post was not because we were lack of preparation. We prepare so that we can confidently pivot when things go wrong. And something you may not know about film sets is that things go wrong. That's just the one guaranteed truth in all of film and life. Did you guys know that anytime lightning strikes anywhere within 6 miles, within 6 miles of your set, if any part of your crew or infrastructure is operating outdoors, the whole operation has to shut down and shelter for 30 minutes. And if in those 30 minutes, lightning strikes again anywhere near the set, that clock starts over. So you can be sitting and waiting for hours doing nothing while a pile of money somewhere burns. And that's what we did because 2/3 of our shoot was outdoors. There's a school bus in the movie. When we bought it, it seemed by all accounts to be a fully functional bus that did all the things you expect a bus to do. And as long as you didn't try to record it doing anything, that was largely the case. We had multiple dialogue scenes set on this bus while it was moving. And I, the auteur-demanding director that I am, what is insisting that these scenes on a moving bus be shot on a moving bus. Because my thinking behind this was that we were already asking the audience to suspend their disbelief, to believe that monsters could exist. I didn't feel like we could afford asking them to also suspend their disbelief to believe that, children can ride a school bus. If we just set up a green screen outside and had a grip, spin some reflectors around, there's just something about that feels like, come on, you can do better than this. So day one of shooting on this thing, the engine shuts down and it won't start. Once we do get it started, it reveals that it no longer wants to drive backwards, which is an important thing for getting it out of a driveway with all your cast and crew on it. I pretty quickly started to learn that shooting on a school bus was one of the most unpleasant experiences I've ever had in my life. For one, there's no air conditioning on these things. And you can't roll a window down because you're recording sound, and all that wind sound and everything will ruin it. So you're just putting everybody inside a big metal hot box and telling them to act and work. They're also built for children. So you put a bunch of adults on there, it gets very unpleasant really quick. The seats are spaced in a way that no average adult can or will ever fit into them. And you're constantly in someone's way and they're constantly in yours. And it does this thing to your brain to where after even half an hour, you start to get what we call bus brain, where your brain just kind of starts to fry and from the heat and stress and constantly moving out of the way. And I would just stare at my shot list and realize that I didn't understand the English language anymore. People would talk to me and it would be words and sounds with no meaning. We did manage to shoot the majority of the moving bus scenes on the bus while it was moving. But there were some shots, because the bus shut down, we had to shoot in front of a blue screen. What was validating was that these blue screen shots, were a pain in the ass in post. These shots are surprisingly complex, even with Primac Keyer, even with any keying tool. These shots are deceptively complex and difficult. So it was very validating to have been the one saying, we can't do blue screen, and then we get in post and it's I'm really glad we didn't do all of these this way. So the moral of the story is don't ride a school bus into your movie, ever. Thankfully, I did get my revenge on that bus, which we will get to later. So against all odds, our shoot wrapped on time and a little bit under budget. How did that happen? Well, for one, our crew, an amazing crew, amazing department heads. I'll still take all the credit. No, a really big reason we were able to never go into overtime was the fact that I kind of felt qualified to be able to say we can fix it in post and mean it. Here's some examples. So often it'd be base camp is right there in frame. That's all of our production buses, and there's no way to narratively explain that. For me, I had the benefit of being able to just confidently know I can paint that stuff out, in post for free, because I just know how to do it. Or, C-stands, production gear, even crew members, there's shots where we just what are you doing back there? We don't need to wait and shoot or even reshoot that take. It was a great take. We'll just paint them out later. There's also things like this. So this is Q. Wonderful, incredible actor. I remember on this take, everyone was like, he looked at the camera, dude. And I was like, no, he's a professional. He did not look at camera. Truth is, no, he didn't really. He's looking near-ish camera for a second. But even if it feels like he looked at camera, the take feels kind of unusable. But I know we can just close his eyes and post for those couple frames. That's really no big deal. So why shoot another take of this? Let's move on, right? Or we have a shot where take 4, Q nailed the timing, but take 5, Tony nailed the timing. Well, we'll just use take 5 and take Q's face from take 4 and put it onto him in take 5. This kind of stuff was surprisingly easier to do, and this kind of stuff happens all the time now in movies, everywhere. And it's incredibly helpful for keeping, especially when you have such a limited budget or resources. This is one of my favorite ones. This is Bianca. Bianca, at this moment we're shooting this. Kyler tells me that Bianca has to wrap in 2 minutes. That means in 2 minutes, my assistant director will call cut, whether I'm ready to cut or not, and Bianca will walk off the set and be done for the day, no matter what I've been able to get. And what I need in this moment, these 2 minutes, I need this close-up of her face, looking at her hand and looking down at her arm, and then I need the insert of her hand and the camera to tilt down to her arm, revealing something important. So I choose to prioritize the shot of her face. Those are hard to recreate from nothing. So we get the shot of her face, and then we have 30 seconds to spare. So we really quickly flip around, film her hand, and before the camera, again, what's so important about this shot is the tilt down to her arm for a reveal, a really major reveal at this moment in the movie. Right before we can tilt down, Kyler calls cut, and Bianca's wrapped. So I get the hand, but I don't get the arm. Normally, this is where you're like this is where you freak out. But I didn't have to freak out because I knew, you know what? I can just extend her arm using Photoshop's generative fill, track it to her wrist using Kingpin Tracker, and just create the tilt down in post. Bada bing, bada boom, you got like a real looking arm. That's totally fake arm. And immediately saves you the headache of like, when are we going to schedule this pickup reshoot, et cetera, et cetera. So visual effects, they solve problems. They also save lives, and I'm not even exaggerating. So like a large part of our story takes place around this pond. One scene even requires the kids to almost fall into it, which was this really cool rig that our stunt team put together where they were going to actually have the kids rigged up to this thing and simulate this move where they almost land in the pond. A week before we're scheduled to move to the pond location, results come back that this pond is, can anyone guess the bacteria it's infested with? This thing's riddled with E. coli. Not only were we no longer going to be able to dangle children over this, we actually were no longer allowed to let grown stunt people dangle over this, which stunt people get really bummed out when you tell them they can't risk their lives for you. So not only that, we weren't even allowed to let people touch the water. And there's some pretty important moments in this movie of people touching the water. So that wasn't just an art solve. Our art department went and bought a kiddie pool, filled it with clean water, and dressed it to look like the pond. And so all these close-ups of people touching water, that's just a little dinosaur kiddie pool. But the stunt, we couldn't do that stunt over a kiddie pool. So you just, visual effects, baby. We just shot them in front of a blue screen over dry land. And it worked great. Okay, this one's fun. This is one of my favorites. So one of the things that makes our monsters unique is that they're physically made up of whatever the character drew them with. So some of them were drawn with crayon. So when they come to life, they are made of crayon wax, which means they leave colored streaks in their wake wherever they are. They also melt if you put fire near them. Some of them are made of chalk, so if you hit them hard enough, they'll burst into really cool colored chalk powder, like you see, on these like color runs that they do. We had crazy success on the proof of concept short, blending practical chalk effects with the visual effects. My favorite was when we filled these ping pong balls on a thread with the chalk powder and had the kid hit him with a baseball bat. The practical chalk hits blended really nicely with all the digital creatures that we added in post. And one of the many things I changed about the feature after making the short was I just, while making the short, I was like, this red chalk dust looks unbelievably cool. And it would be even cooler if it were able to linger in the air, if you set the scene in more of a contained space where the chalk didn't have a lot of place to dissipate or go anywhere. So one of the big things I changed was I moved this specific monster attack indoors, so that now whenever they smashed one of them, the air would get hazier and harder to see through. I was so stoked for this. We were all really excited about this sequence. So we bought buckets of red chalk powder and prepared to get nuts. And you probably know where this is going. 3 days before the shoot, it got E. coli. No, our stunt coordinator, Jennifer Badger, sends me this video. This is her husband pouring chalk powder over a lighter. Fire really likes this stuff. This stuff is extremely combustible. We fill the air in a hallway with this stuff. One static spark could be disastrous. So No longer are we allowed to do the fun stuff, which is fine. I just want to say this on record. If you're a director and you get, don't get bummed out by people trying to keep everyone safe. Like, it's not your job. Your job is to try to find a way to make something even cooler with the circumstances you're given. Our art team, they scrambled to come up with alternatives. They used like baking soda with dye, but nothing like went into the air and stayed there. It just went into the ground. So while everyone's trying these different powder solutions and doing chemistry projects, I pulled my daughter aside against her will and made her shoot this test. This is my daughter, Olivia. Clearly, she does not want to do this. But this is what happens when you decide to be my child. You have to do tests. Now, the result of this test is very much on the extreme side. So I'm about to show you is like, good. Are you sure that's going to work? But I figured out how to imitate our look in After Effects using Super Comp. And this was an exciting development. So a more honed version of this ended up being our solution for almost all of the shots with chalk haze. Like 99% of the shots with chalk haze was done using either just a simple colored gradient in Super Comp or like a stock dust or smoke with Super Comp. Done it? Our children thank you, Super Comp. And alive. Now, we did still manage to do a lot of really cool stuff in camera. So this house that we used, we found this house on a list of houses set for demolition, which meant we could do whatever we wanted to it because it was going to be destroyed when we were done with it. So we pretty much did whatever we wanted to it, even when the cameras weren't rolling. Another in-camera thing, without spoiling it, there is a monster in the movie played by this stunt performer named Leah Hancock. Leah specializes in these contortionist, monster-y moves. She can move all creepy and zombie-like and like crab run on her back and stuff. Nuts. So she's in the movie playing this character that I'm saving for the movie. I don't want to spoil everything. Then there's the ultimate in-camera gag we did with the bus. Which I promise I'm going to get to. We're going to come right back to it, I promise. So visual effects solve problems, they save lives, and they are cool. So this is the part everyone really wants to know about. 11 unique monster drawings that need to be brought to life. If you're going to make an independent movie with very little money, try not to do 11 monsters. Just a tiny bit of advice. I had some experience animating my kids' drawings before. I've made several shorts with them using their drawings and their stories, both of which are actually officially like Red Giant Shorts, or Maxon Shorts. They're on our YouTube channel, Super Lion and Dino Feast. But these were what we call 2.5D, they were just like flat scans of these images that I would animate in After Effects using the Puppet tool. And they looked fun, but they were mostly cute. And I like to transcend cute, everybody. I really wanted this movie to even though it's a movie for kids, or it's a movie about kids, it's about a family, it's not just for families and just for kids, and I wanted to keep it from feeling infantile. I wanted it to feel, I wanted the stakes to be real. So, these are some early tests I did back in 2017. I've been working on this movie a long time. Using Trapcode form. I made custom sprites from real crayon strokes. My wife came in and was like, "What you doing today, buddy? Working with crayons?" But Particular and Form had that killer shader in it that's such a brilliant cheat for lighting and shading that like created this really cool like crayon fur almost. And so the goal of this was to retain the crudeness of a kid's drawing but make it feel tactile and threatening and real. And these early tests were just like, this rules. And they looked awesome, but the problem was the rigs were extremely limited, and they mostly fell apart in close-ups. So we knew we needed the big dogs. So here's a test we did with Cinema 4D. This was done by an artist named Mark Lundgren, who is our lead modeler, and I mean everybody kind of did multiple jobs on this, but he modeled all of our monsters, and this was his initial test he did by using an animated mesh and a couple cloners in Cinema 4D, basically populating with these cards that had the scribbly crayon sprites on them. And this became how we made our monsters. Mark modeled all of our monsters in Cinema 4D, and many of them used the same crayon sprites from my early test, actually. They came out really cool, and I'm very excited for you to see them. There was a season of this movie in post where it was looking like I and a very small team of contractors and friends doing favors, led by our VFX supervisor, Dan Sturm, it felt like we were going to be responsible for the majority of the visual effects in the movie. This was a very fun period. It was difficult and tedious, and it felt pretty dark there for a while, knowing if we could actually do it. But it was also a huge learning time for us just personally. And the stuff that like Hashi and I talked over and over about, like literally to try something in a shot, we'd have to learn something entirely new about in cinema or Redshift or anything that we'd never touched before. And a lot of that stuff is still in the movie. One sequence that our Bootstrap team did entirely that's still in the movie was this one. This is a monster named Dave. Dave is the one. I'm going to show you a lot of Dave. I'm saving a lot of other stuff, I promise. Dave is made of crayon and glitter and has a sticker and Google eye for eyes. Dave was the first monster that Mark modeled, and he was the prototype for our Cinema 4D cloners and sprites workflow. The process for this sequence for us went as follows. Any shot in the cut containing a monster would have either a text placeholder like this, or sometimes I would take the concept art that my friends at Ivy Studio, which is an animation studio in Nashville, they made this concept art for us in pre-production. So I would often take their concept art and animate it in After Effects using the puppet tool just for some temp stand-in stuff. This is what the movie looked like for the longest time, is this goofy thing. So this would be sort of a post-viz for the animation team at IV, the same people who did the concept art, they would actually take and do our animation passes. They would animate it, sending us play blasts to drop into the cut, and once the animation was approved, they'd send it back to us as an Alemic file. Mark would light and render it in Redshift, and then those renders would go to our friend Scott Winston to composite. But first, he would need elements like dirt and dust, which I would usually make for him utilizing the depth pass. Dust was a big thing on the movie because we had these fully digital CGI creatures and as many practical elements we could throw into the shots, like dust, debris. That stuff really, really went a long way in helping sell these things and put and glue them into the movie and make them feel real. So more often than not, my biggest note would just be this picture that we would just send back to Scott, the compositor. In addition to dust, there were other elements that needed to be pre-rendered too before being able to composite. In Dave's case, it was glitter. Whenever Dave roars, he spews glitter everywhere. And that glitter was all made in particular. I made all the glitter. I made this preset system that you can't really fully see it on the screen, I guess, but it had this glitter that moved so organically and had all these little sparkles and stuff in it. This is one of my favorite little rigs. Particular, we also I used it to make some birds. Funny thing about these birds is that Dave eats a bunch of them in the shot, and then later, he does this big roar at the back of the bus. And the plan here was always to have a bunch of glitter hitting the window, but then somebody was like, didn't he just eat a bunch of birds? Like, shouldn't we see some dead birds coming out of his mouth? So Daniel Hashimoto, this is the video he sent me to review the birds that he made.
Blackbirds singing in the dead of night. Bye.
I truly love that man. So now we added birds to the shot, like friggin' John Woo. It's one of my favorite shots in the movie. All right, so Scott Winston would then take all these elements and composite them into Nuke. Dan and I would review them and send our notes, and then finally land on a version that was suitable to my tastes. I'm just kidding, it doesn't usually go this hard. But this is what it felt like I was asking them to do for a long time. It was like, just more friggin' dust, come on. Too much. Making that Dave sequence in full, once our financiers and partners saw that, it clicked. They're like, oh, I get it. I get what you're doing. This rules. let's finish this. Let's not take 5 years to finish this movie. Let's do this. So we ended up being able to bring in some additional vendors. Zero VFX, Mavericks, Fin Design, and Odd Studios. And they helped us get across the finish line. And what was cool was, thanks to the months of work we had done when we thought it was just going to be us, we had all of these assets and temp work that they were able to pick up and run with. Like, all the shots were designed already, and the majority of the assets were built. So, and it turns out it's like insanely easy. It's really easy to communicate what you want when you've already gotten 70% of the way there, and you have it to show. It also made feedback and the review process much more efficient because there were a ton of instances where, like, I could point to reference of, like, this is what we're trying to do, or if they'd send something over for review, I'd do something that I'm never super comfortable doing, but I'd be like, what if it were more like this? And you open up After Effects and you mock something up, which always feels a little bit like reading WebMD to your doctor. But on this, it's like I was able to do that, open up our project files we already had, and be like, well, what if it was a little more like this? And they'd be like, oh yeah, I get it. And sometimes, some cases, they were like, can you just pre-render that layer and send it to us, and we'll just use that? It was very collaborative, very inspiring. All of it, these teams were able to plus times 1,000. It's such a bummer, like, that this narrative keeps getting propagated, right? That visual effects are killing movies or something. It's also weird because, like, the directors working now grew up on movies made by directors who saw visual effects as a tool to tell new and original kinds of stories. And even then, that wasn't a new thing. Does anybody here know the first visual effect ever created? Stu? So, people debate whether it's Mayes or Execution of Mary, Queen of Scots. So in 1895, an 18-second silent film produced by Thomas Edison's lab called The Execution of Mary Stuart, or The Execution of Mary, Queen of Scots. In this short, a blindfolded Mary Stuart is beheaded thanks to a cleverly timed, now kind of juvenile jump cut that replaces the actress with a dummy. So you can see the actress right here, kneels down, axe is raised, and then we get a cut, boop, and it's a dummy. Imagine how horrifying this was to see before you knew cameras could do jump cuts like that. Like, why am I looking in this kinetoscope at this? Like, warn somebody. What's cool about the Execution of Mary, Queen of Scots, it wasn't just the first visual effect to appear on film. This was the first time that a filmmaker hired professional actors to appear on camera. And I think we can all agree that's a pretty integral part of the movie business now. So at the same time, visual effects and actors on screen were an idea that became real. Visual effects don't just solve problems, they don't save lives, they aren't just cool. They were in the house all along. They are filmmaking. And filmmaking is messy. It's challenging, it's expensive, it's exhausting. It defies the laws of nature. Steven Spielberg himself once called it an unnatural act. But it can also be creatively challenging, wildly collaborative, and deeply rewarding. And, you know, at the end of it all, there's some good, there's some bad, but it's all worth it when you get to crash a school bus. Holy hell. Thank you, guys. I really hope you like the movie.